We dive into some pretty unexpected areas on this show, and today is no exception. We're talking all about autism and, well, insomnia.
Yeah, it's a connection that most people probably don't think about, and yet it can have a huge impact on day-to-day life for folks with autism.
It really can, and to guide us through this whole thing, we're looking at this blog post from Cheap ABA. They know a thing or two about autism.
Mm.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of this link, though, maybe we could start with like a quick definition of insomnia. Because like it's more than just having one bad night, right?
Oh, absolutely. We've all had those nights where you just can't seem to fall asleep. You're tossing and turning all night. But insomnia, it's more about this chronic, ongoing struggle to get restful sleep. It's like, imagine feeling like you haven't slept a wink, even after like a full 8 hours. You know that constant fatigue can really wear a person down.
Totally. It's like running a marathon every single day, but on an empty tank.
Yeah.
And, as this blog post points out, sleep deprivation, it's not just like inconvenient.
Mm-hmm.
It can actually significantly impact behavior, mood, even like the ability to learn and process information.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The actual numbers on this are pretty staggering. Studies show that somewhere between 40 and 80% of children with autism experience some form of sleep disturbance.
Wow, 40 to 80%.
Yeah.
That's a huge chunk of the population. So clearly it's not just a coincidence. Let's dive into like the why here. What is it about autism that makes sleep so challenging? The blog post highlights sensory sensitivities as a major player.
Yeah, and think about it this way. Imagine trying to fall asleep in a room that's like buzzing with fluorescent lights, the hum of electronics, maybe you've got like scratchy sheets or something. Now amplify that like tenfold. Many individuals with autism experience these sensory inputs with a heightened intensity, and that makes it really difficult to relax and fall asleep.
It's like trying to find some peace and quiet in like a hurricane of sensations.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the blog post also points to the role of anxiety, which is something that often shows up alongside autism.
Absolutely. Racing thoughts, worries about the day, upcoming events. All of that can make it nearly impossible to quiet the mind and just drift off. And then you've got the whole thing with routines, or rather the disruption of routines.
Yeah, and we all know how much better we sleep when we like stick to some kind of regular schedule, right? But for individuals with autism, having that predictability can be even more critical.
It's about creating this like sense of stability and safety, which can be really grounding for someone who's, easily overstimulated or maybe prone to anxiety. And the Cheap ABA blog post actually shares this really interesting story about a young boy with autism. He struggled to fall asleep for like the longest time. His parents tried everything, but nothing seemed to work until they made this visual bedtime routine chart for him.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
So they use these pictures, right, to represent each step of his bedtime routine. So like brushing his teeth, putting on pajamas, reading a book, and so on. And because he was a very visual learner, seeing those images in order helped him understand what to expect, and it really eased his anxiety around bedtime.
It's amazing how these like simple tools can make such a huge difference. And it also kind of highlights how important it is to remember that like managing sleep challenges in autism often involves going beyond just addressing the sleep itself, right? It's about looking holistically at the individual's needs and creating that really supportive environment.
You hit the nail on the head. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's about understanding this interplay between sensory sensitivities, anxiety routines, and any other kind of co-occurring conditions that might be present. And the blog post actually is into some practical management strategies that can make a big difference.
Like what? Give us the good stuff.
Well, first off, establishing a consistent sleep routine is crucial. But I'm not just talking about having a set bedtime and wake-up time. It's more about creating this calming and predictable sequence of events leading up to sleep, like dimming the lights, giving them a warm bath, reading a favorite book, listening to some calming music.
Basically creating this like soothing transition from the hustle and bustle of the day to the quiet of the night.
Exactly.
I imagine creating a sensory-friendly sleep environment is important too.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, we're trying to minimize anything that could be overstimulating, so make sure the bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool. Think blackout curtains to block out any street lights, maybe a white noise machine to mask any disruptive sounds, and then breathable bedding made from natural fibers like cotton.
It's all about creating that haven of peace.
Right.
And as we mentioned earlier, anxiety can play a huge role in these sleep difficulties. So it makes sense that addressing that underlying anxiety is also crucial.
Exactly. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI as it's often called, can be really effective here. It helps individuals identify and challenge those negative thought patterns and worries that might be keeping them up at night.
So it's like retraining the brain to approach sleep differently.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it often involves techniques like relaxation exercises, mindfulness meditation, and even sleep restriction therapy, where you actually limit your time in bed initially to try and improve sleep efficiency.
That sounds a little counterintuitive, but I can see how it would eventually help regulate your sleep cycle.
It's so true. And you know what? It's funny because even for those of us without autism, like I'm already thinking about my own sleep routine after hearing all of this.
Right. It just goes to show how important good sleep hygiene is for everyone, but especially for individuals with autism where those challenges can be more, amplified. The
Mm.
blog post, I mean, it also emphasizes the importance of like looking at the bigger picture, things like diet and exercise.
Hmm.
That can play a role too.
Oh, right. It's not just about that hour before you go to sleep, it's about the whole day. Exactly. Like limiting sugary drinks and caffeine, especially close to bedtime, can really impact sleep. And on the flip side, regular physical activity can be great for sleep, but you don't want to be hitting the gym like right before bed.
Yeah. It's all about balance. So we've covered a lot of ground here about, autism and insomnia and all these management strategies. But what happens if none of that is enough? What do you do then?
Well, that's when it's time to bring in some professional help. If insomnia is sticking around even after you've tried these strategies, it's really crucial to talk to a doctor. A pediatrician or a sleep specialist can figure out if there's any other underlying medical conditions going on and maybe recommend some more specific interventions.
It's a good reminder that like everyone's experience with autism is different, right? So what works for one person might not work for another. It's about finding the right approach for that specific person and their challenges.
Absolutely. And that's what I really appreciate about this deep dive we've been doing. It really highlights how important it is to understand just how complex autism is and how we need to move past these assumptions and really embrace this more individualized approach. It's about being compassionate, you know?
It's definitely been eye-opening for me. So for our listeners out there, if you're listening and you're thinking about autism, maybe you're dealing with it personally, or maybe it's someone you love, just remember you're not alone.
Yeah, there are so many resources available, strategies that work, and a whole community that's out there ready to support you.
And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, like we always say, go do some more digging yourself. Check out organizations like Cheap ABA. The more we understand about autism and its impact on sleep, the better equipped we'll all be to support those in our lives and make a positive difference.
And you know what? As we wrap up here, it makes you wonder if sleep, something so basic to all of us, can be so affected by autism. What other challenges might we be missing?
That's a really powerful question. And it reminds me to go into every conversation, every challenge with an open mind, be willing to listen and learn from each other. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. Until next time.